Welcome to the RotoWire Prospect Podcast. I'm your host, James Anderson, and we are brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the promo code ROTOPOD for a 100% deposit match over at Prize Picks. My guest this week is the great Aram Leighton of Just Baseball. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically talk about the next great prospects with, a handful of the very best prospects set to either graduate or, they've already made their big league debuts. Aram and I are going to go back and forth nominating candidates for who we think the best hitting prospects yet to reach the majors are. And then we're going to conclude with our personal top fives. And then maybe if we have time, we'll discuss the top pitchers yet to reach the big leagues, but we'll see about that. So Aram, really appreciate you joining me. And without further ado, you get to nominate the first hitter you want to discuss as a top hitting prospect who's yet to reach the majors.
Well, thanks so much for having me on again. It's always a lot of fun and love everything that you're putting out. And I think it's a fun topic. So we get to talk about some of the best of the best right now in the minor leagues. And I love the caveat that they haven't debuted yet. So we're comparing apples to apples, and I think it'll be fun. So I don't want to give away too much. So in the recommendation side, I think I'll go a little bit out of order. So then when we have the top five, people won't know right away. But I will go with one of the first couple guys that's going to be on the top five. And I'll just go with someone who was having a crazy day yesterday and should probably be in the big leagues already. You can probably say that about a couple of these guys, but Junior Caminero, when you look at what he's doing with the Rays, offensively, that's a top five bat for me, no doubt. And, what he's able to do from power and now even an average perspective and, starting to have, I think, a little bit better plate discipline. I think Caminero is a no-brainer top five bat in the minors right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, in terms of guys that haven't debuted this year, he's the guy.
Oh, true. I guess we could do. Yeah, we got to go from last year. So sorry, that's my mistake. I got to remove him.
Well, you just really wanted to talk about how good Caminero is.
I'll just throw out Caminero just as he should be called up this year. Of course, got brought up, and that's the funny thing about it, though, is like, okay, he was able to help them down the stretch last year. And he was viewed as a potential piece for them to try to make, a run to the playoffs and then make an impact in the playoffs. And then now he's not ready yet, and he needs to work on some things at the minor league level. So, all right, already starting off hot for me. But I'll go James Wood then, of course, and take the low hanging fruit there and go with James Wood of the Nationals, a guy that did not play last year at the big league level.
Yeah, man. James Wood. I guess just briefly, since you mentioned Caminero, noteworthy that they did play second base, I think.
Yes.
Yesterday. But
and I think that's a way to shoehorn him in there a little bit more. They like to rotate the DH. Palacios doesn't really hit lefties. They can move Rosario to the outfield. Lowe can sit against lefties, and then Caminero could play against lefties at second, and then DH on other days. And they find a place to put Harold Ramirez. And by a place, I mean probably another team. But I think that would upgrade them now. But again, my bad on that one. We'll get better from here on out.
So James Wood, what kind of stood out to me when I was thinking about it a day or two ago is like kind of the obvious weakness. Like, I know they've talked about how he needs to get better against lefties, but the obvious weakness to me just in his kind of batted ball profile this year is how many balls he's hitting on the ground and his launch angle being quite low or average launch angle. But I was sort of thinking like that almost makes what he's doing even more impressive, just given that his swing path isn't really optimized, and yet he's still getting 586 slug, 7 home runs, despite having that ground ball rate over 50%. So it's kind of, I don't know, what do you make of that? Do you think that he needs to adjust the swing long term to get more balls in the air, or like what do you make of that?
I think it's kind of this process, right? Whereas last year there was some struggles with secondary stuff. I felt like he wasn't staying in the zone long enough. You'd see him kind of spin off or kind of swing over a lot of change ups and things at the bottom of the zone. Very common for guys with long levers and things like that. And I love some of the adjustments that he has made, both from a path perspective overall and just being able to repeat his moves, and some simple, but I think very impactful adjustments to the way that he's loading in his lower half and things like that. I think we're seeing that clearly he's making more consistent contact. He's making harder contact. But to your point, it's not in the air as much. But when you're hitting the ball this hard, and I think he's got a 90th percentile of like 110 miles per hour right now. It's kind of a sliding scale, right? Like there's a tipping point, and of course, you want to see the ball elevated consistently and hit hard. That's the best of both worlds. And Caminero is somebody that kind of juggles this a little bit too, hits the ball really, really hard, similar, 90th percentile to that, and also put the ball on the ground a fair amount. But I think once you get to that echelon of like the top 1 to 2% of guys in the EV department, it becomes a little bit less important on the like average ground ball rate for me. And if you still look at like some of the, some of the things that he's doing in terms of when he leverages his hitters counts, catching it out a little bit further out front and elevating, sometimes a breaking ball that fools him, he's shooting it the other way now instead of a ball that maybe he swung over. So I think that's factoring into it, but I am with you. I think it's kind of now, okay, I recalibrated, I'm making more contact. Now, how can I also ease back into elevating a bit more consistently too, and find that best of both worlds? And to your point, if he finds that, it's going to be really scary because he's already slugging without it. And if there's more in there, holy crap.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really think he had this in him, honestly, in terms of just how much he's cut the swing and miss and the strikeout rate. Obviously he's playing a little over his head right now. Like you got the 422 BABIP and everything, but I'd give him like an A+ really for just how he's gotten out there this year, dating back to spring training, the work he definitely put in the off season. We've seen, guys like Wyatt Langford, Jackson Holiday, lesser guys get the call and then they kind of go through some growing pains. Do you see Wood being a guy that probably has to go through those similar types of growing pains? Do you think he might be someone that when we do see him, he hits the ground running? Like how do you kind of envision his first kind of couple months in the big leagues going this summer?
I think it's a great question because, I could kind of see it going either way. I think he's going to have those nice stretches, but I think there's going to be points where he gets spun a lot and they're going to give him a lot of breaking balls. And what we've seen is he's, laying off him a bit better this year, but he's still a guy that likes to pull the trigger a fair amount. He's not going to be incredibly patient compared to some of the other guys that are maybe walking at that clip. And he's getting pitched around a ton, at the AAA level right now, whereas in the big leagues, maybe they go after him a little bit more, with secondary stuff and can locate it a bit better. And I think there will be some ups and downs, but the fact that he's improved so much contact wise and he's hitting the ball so hard, he doesn't need to slug to survive and slug to put up decent numbers, out of the gate. And then the power can continue to tick up and become more of a factor in games. I do think that he would be a better option than some of the guys that they've got out there right now, even with some volatility. I do think there would naturally be some volatility, especially against lefties, who he's looked much improved against 2 home runs last week against lefties, which was, a great sign, as that's one of the things that they wanted him to, continue to work on. But I think there would be some ups and downs, but overall, I think people would be surprised at, I think the way that he performs. I think he's maybe a bit more ready than some of the other prospects. And it's a big surprise considering where he was at last year. But I think it's really hard to argue against the mechanical adjustments and then the data that kind of backs it up.
Yeah, I had I think one or multiple people kind of have asked me just sort of how he compares to Elly De La Cruz. Not since the season started, but kind of like off season towards the end of last year, that type of thing. And the biggest thing that jumped out to me was just Elly De La Cruz steals bases at a rate that is just, you just don't really see it. But I am intrigued by the fact that Wood has attempted 10 steals in 36 games at AAA after only attempting 12 in 87 games at AA last year. He's a really good athlete for his size. Where do you sort of see the speed being at with Wood, as a rookie, as a sophomore, and then sort of as he gets into his mid to late 20s?
That's a guy that seeing him, in person again this spring was, I guess, the first couple of times I'd seen him, I didn't really see him kick it in gear fully, and I don't know if he really needed to in those games. I saw him try to leg one out, and man, he was even quicker than I had remembered. And it's sometimes it's difficult for guys that are that big and strong to to accelerate. Once they get going, once they're underway, they can motor, and that'll help them in the outfield, and that'll help them still be valuable on first to third and on the bases. But yeah, can you get that jump? Can you move? To me, he looks quicker, and I think that's something that he's probably worked on. And just in general for the outfield side of things, jumps, quickness, first step, that also spills over into the bases a lot of times too. And I think as he continues to gain comfort in that department as well, I do think he can be a guy that can steal plenty of bags. Again, he moves really well for how big he is. And I know it's home to first times don't always correlate to stolen bases. And obviously being a left-handed hitter with those big strides, that helps. But where we're at in the game and the way that, they're able to facilitate stolen bases more, I wouldn't be surprised if we even see, as he gets more comfortable in the big leagues, that continue to tick up as he gets more reps.
And then just to kind of wrap up, Wood, do you think they're just waiting until they think the Super 2 data is passed? Like, when do you think we actually see him?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I was also talking to some folks just because the PPI rule in general is not very concretely laid out in the CBA. But of course, as we know, like once you miss that prospect promotion incentive deadline, there's not really much incentive anymore to promote your prospect. And honestly, if it is going the way that I understand it to go, which is if the player now gets called up after the deadline and has a phenomenal season and ends up, backing into an opportunity to maybe finish top 2 in Rookie of the Year because there's not too many other people, putting up great numbers. National League is a little bit more difficult than the American League, but all of a sudden they could get that full year of service time. And again, I reached out to a couple folks. They seem to believe that would be the way that it would go too. So you're almost disincentivized now at this point to bring him up. And it kind of correlates too with the Super 2 deadline, where you might as well just kind of wait a little bit longer. I think it'll probably be a few more weeks where if they feel like he can't, close the gap on the Rookie of the Year race and you have the Super 2 deadline factored in, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a few more weeks before we see Wood.
Yeah, I sure hope it's within the next few weeks, because I'd worry about stagnation a little bit at a certain point if they
I feel like it wouldn't be much more than, it could be as much as a month. I'd be surprised if it goes much further than mid-June. I agree, the stagnation side of it. And what else do you really need to see? The Nationals are actually playing decent ball, and then you want to start to get that group together and start focusing on winning ball games a bit more. And I think he gives them a better chance to do so than what they've been getting from Joey Gallo and some of the other guys that they're rolling out there.
All right, so we've discussed James Wood. We briefly discussed Junior Caminero, and I will nominate Coby Mayo as a player to discuss here. He's just hit at every single level. Very, very consistent performer. Always been young for his levels. I think that the concerns about just the swing being a little funky, I think those are well in the rearview mirror at this point. He was striking out quite a bit at the beginning of the year, but I mean, he's just been absolutely locked in after the first 10 days, and he was producing a ton even when he did have like a strikeout rate over 30%. But now he's really dialed in. I think you could argue that maybe he's just the best like pure hitter for impact yet to make his big league debut. We've got hard hit data up on RotoWire, and he's got the third highest hard hit rate among top 400 prospects, behind just Joey Loperfido and Heston Kierstead, both of whom have already debuted. So, Coby Mayo really checks a lot of boxes for me, and probably power over hit, but I do think that the hit tool will get to a pretty good place. Maybe not as a rookie, but I think like in his mid-20s, this is a guy that's going to be hitting above 270, I think. What do you think of Mayo? Do you see any way that this goes poorly for him long-term as a hitter?
I mean, the question would be the hit tool, right? And I think that the reality is, though, even if he is whiffing at a pretty high clip, I just think he's going to be too productive because of the way that you mentioned he hits the ball as hard as just about anybody that we've got left in the minor leagues right now. And the contact rates are still fine overall. And it's really hard to argue against the way that he's able to tap into that power consistently in games. We're talking about ground ball rates that are routinely in the low 30%, the ability to hit it hard to all fields, but pull side, it's monster power. Even in Baltimore, he can leave. I'm pretty sure almost all of his home runs, or a huge portion of his home runs to the pull side this year, would have even been gone, pretty easily in Baltimore with that cavernous, left field out there. So I feel really confident that he's going to hit enough and that the power is going to translate in games. And we actually had him on the call up last week on our prospect podcast, and the mental side is what really stands out to me with him too. A guy that has been young at each stop, and a guy that has just continued to get better. And when he talked about kind of the idea of, oh, yes, I'm aware that, I have some stretches where I strike out and things like that. But then I look at my numbers at the end of the year and they're really good and the strikeout rate's palatable. I've kind of learned to turn the page. If I have 0 for 5 with 3 or 4 Ks, I can just fix that the next day with a good game. And I feel like his mentality is really, really advanced for his age. And that's why he's been able to get to each stop. And his approach has always been really good for him. And I know the walk rate doesn't reflect it, but he's been running a chase rate in the low 20%. He's consistently been able to do that over the last couple seasons. I think this is one of the safer bats you're going to find that are going to strike out more than 25% of the time right now in the minor leagues, which I know can sound like a little bit of an oxymoron, but between the power, the ability to lift consistently, good swing decisions, and makeup that I really do believe in. And you mentioned like the little hitch thing and things like that. Like, I think it's very clear that that's just a move that helps him get to his spot and elevate. And I agree. I think he's kind of put that to bed. It's pretty hard to make a case against this kid right now with everything that he's doing. And I feel like a call up to Baltimore is not far away. I would probably bet on Mayo even getting up before James Wood potentially.
Wow. Yeah, that'd be exciting. Do you have any kind of like long-term comps on Wood as a hitter? Like I think like sort of an obvious like ceiling comp to me is Austin Riley, just kind of given the same kind of developmental path and the strikeout issues that kind of eventually fell into the background.
Yeah, and ironically on the defensive side of things too, kind of a similar trajectory where it was like, oh, is he going to be able to do it? Is he going to be able to do it? And worked really hard and became a very good, like a very solid third baseman for what the expectation I think once was. I feel like Riley's probably one of the best offensive comps you're going to find there with the trajectory. I'm trying to think off the top of my head of some guys that, elevate the way that he does and hits the ball as hard as he does. And it's not a huge list, to be honest. And I think the contact rates being a little bit better than the K rate may imply at this stage is very reminiscent of Austin Riley. So I do think that is the best like high end comp.
All right. We have touched on James Wood and Coby Mayo. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. That definitely helps us out. Going to head to a quick message from the sponsors, and we come back. Aram will nominate a third hitter to discuss as one of the potential top 5 hitters left to debut. Have you ever dreamed of stepping into the shoes of general manager? Welcome to So Rare, MLB, a groundbreaking fantasy baseball game where you call the shots. Take charge and make your managerial mark by collecting officially licensed digital player cards of your favorite MLB stars. These aren't just any cards. They're your ticket to compete for over $1 million in total cash rewards and other amazing prizes. Imagine winning VIP trips to the MLB All-Star 2024 or getting your hands on signed merchandise from top MLB players. Here's how it works. Use your cards to set your lineup each game week. Real-world plays like hits, strikeouts, and homers will power your team's performance. Climb the leaderboards and snag weekly wins from cash prizes to more cards and unforgettable experiences. But there's more. Build an iconic collection of your favorite teams and players to unlock gameplay bonuses and exclusive rewards. The rarer the card, the higher your score, and the bigger your edge in competitions. And when you're ready to trade, the So Rare Marketplace offers a vibrant community of managers. Engage in live auctions, make instant buys, or trade cards peer-to-peer. Starting is absolutely free. Draft your first team of common cards today and feel the thrill of competition as you climb the ranks to baseball mastery. What are you waiting for? Join So Rare MLB today. Transform your passion for baseball into a quest for glory and get rewarded for your baseball savvy. Sign up today with the link in the description and get 50% off your first pro cards up to $50. It's your passion rewarded. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states across the country. Prize Picks is really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. I like the under on Framber Valdez, 6.5 strikeouts tonight against the A's. And I like the under on 35.5 Anthony Edwards points plus rebounds Thursday night against the Warriors. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and enormous selection of players and stat types are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Download the app today and use code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code ROTOPOD for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, Aram, we're back, and we've touched on James Wood. We've touched on Coby Mayo. Who would you like to nominate next as a potential top 5 hitting prospect yet to debut in the big leagues?
I'll go with a guy that's unfortunately been on the shelf a little bit, but Walker Jenkins. Walker Jenkins of the Minnesota Twins. I think when you look at what he's able to do across the board, it's really impressive in terms of you're going to have a great field to hit, and hopefully he can come back soon and get off the IL. But great field to hit, big body that he's continuing to fill out and tap into more power. We saw, in the early parts of the spring, he was already popping higher exit velocities than we had seen from last season after he signed when he stood on his head for his pro debut. It was one of my favorite swings in the draft. It's still one of my favorite swings to watch in minor league baseball. Simple. He gets on plane so early. He lives through the zone, but he's also very adjustable and now adding more impact. And I think there's going to be even more in there as he, continues to fill out as such a young player. I think it's just a rare and elusive blend of plus hit and plus power that can make him an absolute monster. You pair in the fact that, we'll have to see it against better competition, but the fact that he has a fantastic approach and has a good feel for the strike zone, it's really hard to poke a hole in his offensive game as well. And maybe needs to elevate a bit more. And I think he was getting ready to start to do that. And I'm looking forward to seeing him back on the field soon.
Yeah, man. I really think that this injury kind of just brutal timing, because I really think like he might be one of the talks of the minor leagues right now if he'd been healthy. We did get a comment on Twitter from Joe Bartle asking for a little hobby talk. And I'd actually been talking with someone recently about Walker Jenkins, just in terms of how I rank him among that like Bowman class.
Yeah.
It seems like a great time to buy low on Jenkins, possibly in the card market and in Dynasty.
I mean, absolutely. And I don't know if, I don't know how it might depend on the eye of the beholder at the time, especially in Dynasty. But if some people are a little bit wary of the injuries, like I think I was really excited to see him in the spring breakout game. And unfortunately, he was a late scratch for precautionary reasons for like a quad thing. And then in that first game of the year, kind of jumps up for a ball and has some sort of lower body issue. So could be related. But it just seems like that was something that may have been nagging him, and they just want to make sure that he really gets right and then can finish the season. And who knows, we could end up seeing him. Maybe they even send him to the Arizona Fall League at some point to get more reps. We'll find out. But I think he's gonna have plenty of time to make up that ground this year. And I think they're more just erring on the side of caution. But yeah, when you look at the floor ceiling situation, and it's weird to talk about a floor of a guy that, we haven't seen play a ton just yet, but I can feel pretty confident about the offensive profile. And then the fact that there's some speed in there too, from a fantasy perspective. Like, I don't know how many bags he's going to steal, but it's going to be something. Like the speed will be a factor in some capacity, which when you're looking at a guy that could give you, plus power and could give you plenty of on base as well. Like that's a rare blend of offensive value. From the hobby perspective, I would love to pick up as many Walker Jenkins cards as I could. Again, I feel very confident that at the very least, he's going to be considered a top prospect, one of the top 20 prospects in the game consistently. He was a top 10 guy for us going into the season. I'm not going to move him because he was hurt just yet. And I feel like you don't usually get to buy in on those guys. I think where they're maybe valued at, where he's valued at right now because of the injury. And I think, a lot of focus on some other guys that have been really performing out of the gate.
Yeah, I had him top 10 as well. And I buy your high floor comment with regards to him, just because, there really isn't much track record of a prep hitter with his track record and pedigree going into the draft, not developing into something solid at the big league level. like, he was a better amateur prospect than Mickey Moniak was, even though
Mhm.
Mickey Moniak went first overall. Walker Jenkins is just a fantastic high school prospect. So I buy the high floor comment with him. And, I think for kind of like ceiling, maybe it could be kind of like a Kyle Tucker type of thing. Different swings, different physiques, I guess, kind of coming in. But, that's sort of, you talked about the stolen bases. Like, he's just going to steal bases based on how often he's on base and his instincts. And, he's going to be a fine runner. But I do think he will steal more bases than the raw speed grade might suggest.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll add too is the body control and just the ability to repeat his moves. He's so comfortable left on left already too. We only have a small sample, but I've been able to catch plenty of at-bats of his, like left on left, and just seeing the takes looking easy and everything like that. And I think last year he was 10 for 22 left on left. So there's a level of comfort there too that, I think is going to continue to help him be an everyday player, at the highest level, even if it doesn't all click. That, I think gives him, again, helps solidify that floor.
All right. My turn to nominate a guy. Going to one of my prospect crushes. Not a guy that you'll see top 15 on real life lists, I don't think, but I think Xavier Isaac is a top 15 fantasy prospect to me at this point. The one thing he still hasn't quite done is hit lefties consistently in games, but I don't really care. I just think he's young enough and dominant enough against righties. I just believe he's going to get there against same-handed pitching. Hopefully the Rays let him get there. Maybe it's not up to him necessarily, but even if he were to just mostly play against righties, I think this is a 30 homer hitter at peak. He hits some of the most majestic moonshots that you'll see. And I still think he's kind of scratching the surface from a game power standpoint. He's got the slug under 500, 238 ISO. To me, that's kind of the floor for him. And he moves pretty well. Everyone knows he's a big first baseman, but he's an athletic 6'4", I think. And he's stolen 5 bases on 5 attempts this year. So we've seen guys, Josh Naylor, Freddie Freeman, et cetera, steal bases in the big leagues at that position. I do think that could be a small part of his game, but it's really just the cleanup hitting potential there. Just sort of how he has checked the boxes you want to see a first base only prospect check to me. Today.
I love that you mentioned him. He's also one of my favorite prospects in minor league baseball. And, when I was super bummed about not being able to see Walker Jenkins in that same game, I fortunately was able to see, I think, one of the best performances I've seen on a baseball field from Xavier Isaac in that spring breakout game with the 2 home runs. I mean, a no doubter to dead center, and then shooting one the other way with that also got out in half a second, and then also shot a double rocket down the line the other way. That's the other aspect that I think is really fascinating with Isaac. You mentioned the moon shots where he hit a home run. I think it was 470 feet almost at 114 miles an hour the other day. But then he also in that same game, had a swing where a little bit fooled left on left. It's almost a one-handed swing and it's 106 the other way. This guy's B swings are doing as much damage as some other guys' A swings. And that's another thing that you really want to see from, a first base prospect, because when you're not getting your A swings off, are you able to still do damage? And, I think that's something that when we look at swing speed and all that stuff in Savant now, there's a good aspect of being able to consistently swing hard, but I also want to see guys that can still do damage with, their B swing. And it might still be harder than some other swings, but it won't quite show up the same way. Isaac is just a guy that I think has a lot of confidence in his plate coverage, can turn around velocity, can easily leave the yard the other way. And the approach keeps getting better and better. I'm with you. There's not much else you can really look at besides the left on left thing, which I do think is going to get better. Cause you mentioned the athleticism. You can see the athleticism in the box. And I think that's a big reason why he's adjustable and a big reason why he's able to, do the damage that he's able to do. But remember, this is a guy that missed part of his senior year with a foot issue and has not had a ton of reps. He's 20 years old. So I think he's going to keep getting better and better as well. And he's heating up right now. And I think a lot of people are going to start to if you're not on board already, I think a lot of people are, but I think he's about to go nuts, and to the point where they're going to say, okay, we got to bump you up to AA, because I think some of the numbers that he's going to start to put up now as he's heating up are going to be pretty crazy in high A. And I think it's going to start to generate a lot of buzz. You just can't teach that power.
You cannot teach that power. That's for sure. Okay, Aram, who do you want to nominate and discuss next here?
I'll go with someone that's struggling a little bit, but he's still got to be in the conversation, and struggle is a relative term. But Dylan Crews, Washington Nationals, of course. Crews punching a little bit. Definitely something that I think needs to be discussed. But he's also still hitting the ball really hard, like really, really hard. We already have a home run this year at 114 to dead center. He's put up plenty of plus EVs, and 90th percentile is right around like 107. So like he's hitting the ball really hard, but he's also chasing a lot more than I was expecting. And the thing that he was lauded for so much, right? The eye has just not really been there. I've seen a lot of big chases, whether it's fastballs up and advantage counts, and it's like, whoa, like you're not seeing the ball well, like, or do you have an approach there? What is it? And then maybe breaking balls that just never really had too much of a chance. Seems like he's trying to do a little bit too much. But even then, when you're seeing the quality of contact when he is making contact, and it's again to all fields, there's these flashes that it's like, there's Dylan Crews. It's going to be a fun conversation in a few minutes as to where he stacks up with these other guys, because you don't want to be too reactionary with 40 games, but just seeing the expansive approach at times and some just bad swing decisions is surprising to me. And to me, it's more of an shining the light on, hey, this might just be a little bit more of a developmental process from a guy who just turned 22 and not a fast track college guy like everybody thought. That doesn't mean that he's not going to become the player that a lot of people hoped he would be. It just means maybe he's not up in September this year, and that's okay. I think that there's some things that he needs to work on in terms of like mechanics, and you can see he becomes very it's very shifty with his weight, where he likes to get into that backside, but then you're also going to see him drift forward. And when you get really into those quads, it can be hard to control that weight back and forth, and you can see him kind of sway a little bit. And I think that's causing him to feel crowded and rushed, and that's why he's struggling with fastballs to do damage with that. And I think that's why he's cheating a little bit too. He just looks rushed. I think that's something that he could easily work through and figure out. This guy hasn't really faced adversity in his entire baseball career. And now as a professional facing relative adversity, I'm confident that he can, work through this. But then again, the Nationals aren't quite renowned for this kind of thing, but look at James Wood.
Yeah. I was kind of bearish on Crews, just from an upside standpoint, kind of coming into the year. Like I certainly think he's going to be an everyday outfielder for the Nationals, probably by next summer, but, and maybe he can, my sort of realistic sort of ceiling from like a fantasy standpoint comp on him is kind of like Seiya Suzuki, like really good hitter, but just, you're not getting 30 bombs. Probably you're not getting 20 steals.
But you try to talk yourself into it every year, almost a little bit, right? Like, oh, this is the year it's going to happen. This is when he's going to do it.
I also see some similar, like he almost kind of reminds me of hitter version of prospect Jack Leiter. Not like, forget what Leiter's done this year, but just, the scouting report, going into the draft with Leiter and with Crews is kind of like, it's almost sort of like fast to the majors, really high floor, that they should be able to have success, at AA in short order. And it didn't really happen for Leiter. And then it didn't really happen for him the next year. And, Crews, I don't know. I worry a little bit that, when we fast forward like 2 months, there aren't going to be, clear signs of progress there with him. But, his track record prior to getting to AA last year was still really tough to push back against. So probably good to preach patience on him to some extent there.
Yeah.
I'm going to nominate his teammate, actually, Brady House. Brady House he's just been on one. And, the big kind of thing everyone's talking about is the new swing speed data that's now public. And, everyone's talking about how you want like a short, fast swing. I'm impressed by how short Brady House's swing looks to me. I mean, everyone knows about the bat speed with House dating back to when he was an amateur. He's still got that really intense bat speed just based on the eye test for me, but he's able to get to pitches in a hurry. He's able to get to pitches, it looks like, on all quadrants. And he's 21 years old, or he's 20 right now. He turns 21 in a few weeks. And he's just been red hot at Double-A, clear third baseman of the future to me for the Nationals. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him kind of in late August this year, late enough that he doesn't exhaust his prospect eligibility, but then kind of setting him up to break camp as the everyday third baseman in 2025 and make a run at that PPI pick. What do you think about House?
I think he's a guy that can translate pretty well to the big leagues potentially too, as he continues to refine the approach. And it's gotten better. I mean, the chase rates were really high last year. He's continued to cut down on them, and it's gotten better this year. But you talk about how short the swing is for a guy that's 6'3", can result in it being a bit flatter. And that was what was causing, I think, some more elevated ground ball rates in the past. But he's also been able to elevate a little bit more now too. That efficiency though, and the slightly flatter swing, I think is okay when you're hitting the ball as hard as he does, and now starting to backspin a little bit more, because what do you see in the big leagues all the time now? It's these high spin, high carry heaters. And Brady House, with his path and the way that he operates and, limited pre-swing movement, I think it's pretty simple. He's going to be able to clip a lot of those fastballs at the top of the zone. And I think that kind of helps him, be able to shrink it down. And I think will help him with breaking balls, which is, sliders have been a challenge for him at times. You can kind of get in and out of the zone too quick at times, but being able to attack those fastballs at the top and be on plane for those, I think that's something that he does better than just about anybody at that level. And then the power, as you mentioned, it's also to all fields. He's gone the other way with authority. Obviously, he can hit the ball really hard to the pull side. And I think the most encouraging thing for me too, on top of that, is the fact that he's matched these numbers now at Double-A. It's a big leap, especially for a guy that's not even 21 yet, as you mentioned. And the fact that we're seeing that chase continue to drop, the ground ball rates continue to drop while playing the best competition that he has played. It's all great signs from Brady House. And I know it doesn't matter as much from a fantasy perspective, but the fact that he's a solid third baseman too, it just helps to know that, hey, he doesn't absolutely have to slug like crazy to stay in the lineup, because he actually has some utility beyond that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And, that's the type of thing that, say he gets off to like a slower start in the big leagues. That's the type of thing that could keep him up and avoid him heading back to the minors if his bat's slumping. Excited for the future with Brady House there in Washington. Aram, who's the next hitter you want to talk about?
I'm gonna throw in Colson Montgomery at the Chicago White Sox. And Colson, I think because of the fact that he's in AAA and he's not lighting the world on fire, I think it becomes kind of easy to overlook him a bit. And I know not a lot of people are jumping up and down to talk about the White Sox right now, though the farm system is much improved. But Colson, I mean, we talk about field to hit for a guy that's big. He's 6'4", but it makes a lot of contact, and another swing that is just really pretty from the left side. The thing that I like about him is I think you're starting to see where the power can be, and we've gotten flashes of it, especially to the pull side, or last year even he demolished some baseballs. Injuries have kind of, feels like every time he's starting to really build this momentum, injuries kind of slow it a little bit. But then even when you look at last year across everywhere, still put up an OPS just under 900, walked at a 15% clip and struck out, just below a 22% clip with solid contact rates and consistently hitting the ball hard and elevating. So it's one of those things where I look at another floor ceiling situation here where I can see a ceiling that is extremely exciting, which is well above average hit tool and plus power easily as he continues to just grow into his frame and use those long levers as gain power and translate that more. But beyond that, if it doesn't all click power wise, he still already hits the ball hard enough, and there's already still a good enough field to hit and approach that, you feel confident that there's a big league regular in there at the very least. But I think you can very, very clearly see a guy that has a chance to be a monster offensively. And I think that the acclimation process for someone who's missed out on a lot of reps in the upper levels and just in the minors period with some injuries, and already in AAA as a high school guy in his age 22 season, and he'll be 22 all year. I think he's doing well. He's been doing better of late, and I wouldn't be surprised if he settles in and really gets rolling. And even if he's just doing pretty well, he's going to get a shot with the White Sox. I mean, they don't have a lot of options, especially at shortstop. And I don't love the glove, but I think it can be passable. And he's got a straight runway there.
He's got a very straight runway there. They've almost kind of put too much on him, I think, like publicly a little bit, to where the White Sox fans think he's just going to be the savior. But I think he is. I think he's kind of a floor over ceiling guy a little bit, like just in terms of like realistic outcomes. Like I'm sort of thinking like 250-ish hitter with like a higher OBP, and then like 25 to 30 homers during his peak years, that type of thing. Does that sound about right to you?
I think that's the most realistic outcome. I think what makes him, I think, a little bit more tantalizing as a prospect is that, you see those flashes of like 114, 115 mile an hour exit velocity to the pull side. You see how big he is, and you're like, oh man, if he can fully tap into that. I always talk about Christian Yelich. Like, Yelich was a guy that the field of hit was there, and he was big league ready, but he was nowhere near a finished product because he wasn't tapping into the power that people knew he had in there as a big, longer levered, skinny, but longer levered guy that generated a lot of bat speed. And I could see something similar with Montgomery, where he gets up to the big leagues. He looks closer to that, 250, 260, maybe even a little bit better than that, because I do think the field of hits pretty solid, but with 20 to 25, and then maybe in year 3 in the big leagues, all of a sudden that power really starts showing up. I've talked about that with Jackson Merrill too, a guy that I also think could have that trajectory where he's holding his own and putting up good big league numbers, but then his development's like the final stages is still being had at the big league level, and then all of a sudden year 4, he's starting to tap into that power. I think even Abrams could be an example of that, but he's had some unique circumstances of just being rushed and treated unfairly as well. But yeah, I think he could be one of those cases too. But I do think that line that you throw out is probably the most likely scenario. But we're also, I think we can dream on a little bit more with him.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the power potential is alluring for sure. And the playing time. Do you have any thoughts about like the White Sox and sort of, what kind of tax we should put on prospects that they're trying to develop? Like is from a hitting prospect standpoint, do you think they're like among the worst? Do you think that they're maybe getting better? Like, where are we at on the White Sox developmentally with these position players?
That's a great question. I think it's getting better slowly, but it's definitely not an organization that I want to see my prospects go to if I'm a dynasty owner or anything like that. I do think that, you look case by case, and there's some guys that can kind of just overcome that. And I think the Colson Montgomerys are a little bit more able to do so compared to like an Oscar Colas, who's more of a free swinger. And, you got to kind of fine tune some things for those guys to succeed. Whereas I feel like a Colson can kind of get there on his own. But I would say, the White Sox are definitely a team that it doesn't help when they're a prospect in their system, because there just has not been a lot of examples in their recent memory of success of them developing guys. I will say though, and I don't know if it was third party or what it may be, but Jacob Gonzalez, they draft that guy. I did not like the swing in college, and I don't think many people did. They draft him. You look at him now, swing looks 10 times better. Everything looks better, from his setup to his pre-swing moves to the actual path itself, and he's playing a lot better. So again, I don't know if he went outside and did that, but the fact that the White Sox drafted him when a lot of people had some concerns about the swing and the setup, and then he emerges this year with a totally different swing and setup and is having success, that it's one case there, but I don't know if you even had that one case, the last couple of years. So that is encouraging. Yeah,
they've struggled with picking out the groceries and cooking the meal. But I think that's a good Gonzalez is a good one to reference, just in terms of recent guys where I'm with you. Like, I didn't even rank him coming into the year on the top 400 just because I was so down on him. But yeah, he's definitely getting added back. So, all right, we've discussed James Wood. We've discussed Coby Mayo. We've discussed Walker Jenkins, Xavier Isaac, Dylan Cruz, Brady House, Colson Montgomery. I'm going to throw out Lazaro Montes, and I'm really interested on your take on Montes because, I know he's been kind of a divisive prospect. People not really buying the hit tool necessarily, at least coming into the year. I don't know if people are singing a different tune now or not, but like I look at what guys like, Roderick Arias and Josue DePaula and Drew Jones are doing at single A. And then I look at what Lazaro Montes is doing, and, it's got to count for something. I know he's only doing it at single A, but arguably the best hitter at single A when all context is factored in.
I agree. It absolutely has to matter. Especially when you have, some numbers to look at that you have a tangible adjustment also with his setup. A guy that now his hands are a little bit closer to where his slot is, and he's a big dude. So if you can minimize moves, you think about some of the biggest hitters in baseball, you kind of want to get close to where your slot is and not have to move your gargantuan body so much and repeat that move and repeat the timing of it. So his hands are a little bit deeper and closer to his slot. And setup is a little bit more conducive to just kind of getting to his spot easier and earlier. And I think you're seeing the result is way less whiff. I think that there's going to be a higher strikeout rate at more challenging levels. And I think the contact rates would imply that. But the contact rates are better than they were at the complex, better than they were at the DSL. And you have a tangible adjustment to precede that. Like, I'll buy into that for sure. And then you still have the light tower power. You still have a guy that I think has, for his age and for his size of his strike zone, a great feel for the zone. I'm 100% buying what he is doing in terms of the improvements and what we're seeing offensively. I think he's polarizing because people just love to go straight to Jordan, and that's unfair to him because Jordan is a plus, like easy plus hitter. And I just think it's incredibly rare to find that. And then, of course, he works with like Jordan's coach, and that doesn't help the narrative. But I also think that the people that were just writing off the hit tool before we've even seen him play in full season ball and really seen him be able to adjust is also unfair, and hence the polarizing. I definitely lean more towards hey, this guy made some adjustments. He's extremely talented, and he looks like a more complete hitter. He's not a guy that's just going to flash 118 and disappear. He's driving balls. We're seeing him with 2 strikes shoot a ball the other way with like the ass out singles sometimes. Like those are good. Like you want to see some of those for guys that can crush home runs when they're locked in, because that'll help you survive the lulls, and that'll make you even more difficult to pitch to. And right now, I think he's as difficult to pitch to as anybody.
Yeah, where do you think he ends up defensively?
DH. I'll be honest. That was some wild video to watch. I went through like all of the 5 balls that had gone his way. There was a triple even where like he stopped and then went to start again, and it was like he had clown shoes on. I think the closest comp, like feet wise, is Nick Castellanos, who also looks like he's got clown shoes on. I don't know how to describe it. It looks like their shoes are like 30 sizes too big for them, and it just looks so heavy. I'm hoping he could figure out a corner. I think it's a stretch, probably. I do ultimately think he's pretty locked in at DH.
Yeah, when you were talking about watching that tape on him, I was thinking of Domingo Santana. I don't know if you remember ever watching him play the outfield.
Yeah.
Do you think like first base is an option at all for him, or
I would love to see them try that. I was going to float that, and they haven't tried it yet. I think that's possible. Like the way that he moves in the box, you think he'd be able to move his feet at least well enough to play a passable first base. I think that's going to be what they try next, and that might work. Like if he's a semi bad first baseman, it's fine. And I think ultimately that probably makes the most sense as the first base DH type of role. He'd be a big target, you know that.
Yeah. I mean, if the bat's as good as we hope it is, it won't really matter.
No.
But yeah, worth noting that probably not a right fielder long term.
No.
So we've covered a decent amount of players. Is there anyone you want to go into depth on before we sort of talk top fives. I've got some honorable mentions, but happy to keep going if there's anyone else you want to bring up before we get to the top fives.
Yeah, I mean, one other name I was going to throw out there is Roman Anthony, because I know he got off to a slow start, and I just wanted to kind of provide some context. Was he? I love it. I love it because again, context is always key here, because I think when we look at guys that are just, we start to pit them against themselves a little bit, right? Where they're performing so well, they crush through these levels, then they get challenged, and then they're challenged. So it's normal. When you're challenged, it should be an uphill battle for a little bit. And I think that's what it's been a little bit for him this year. I know he had put up good numbers at the level last year, but still, I mean, it's a challenge over a larger sample and to do it again the next year. And in the early part of the year, was really struggling to pull the ball with authority, and also was just passive. I couldn't tell you how many times I watched him take 1-0, 2-0 fastballs for strikes. And that's, we saw it with Emmanuel Rodriguez. I thought it was very similar to that, where it was, oh yeah, he walks a lot, let's celebrate him for that. But it almost goes too far to where it's actually not great swing decisions, because he's given away some leveraged counts. And in Double-A, it becomes a lot harder when you give those away, because a lot of these guys can really throw. So now we're seeing him a little bit more aggressive, and I think capitalizing on those advantage counts, but also seeing him pull the ball with authority a bit more. We know he can go the other way. I mean, how many home runs did you see on the highlight reel last year of him going over that monster in left field? And then, to dead center, no problem. But sometimes with his sequencing, the body can kind of go and the bat can drag a bit. And then all of a sudden it becomes very difficult to turn stuff around inside with authority. And that was the struggle in the beginning. And then I think he's kind of got his timing back. He's got his moves back and seems to be a little bit more in rhythm. And now we're starting to see him pull the ball a bit more. The thing that's important with Anthony, though, is even though the numbers haven't been great, he's been great over the last 10 games. I think OPS over 900 over the last 12 games. He's hitting the ball as hard as he ever has. I mean, I think he put up a new max of 113, and then he's matched that several other times this year. So he's hitting the ball as hard as he ever has. His slow start, quote unquote, is still a 750 OPS as a guy who turned 20 2 days ago at Double-A. And he can also run a little too. We haven't seen the stolen base be a huge part of anything yet, but I do think that could be a factor down the line as well. He is a good athlete. And I think that passiveness will eventually improve to just a strong ability to walk and a good approach, because he clearly does have a good feel for the zone. When you can walk, you have a decent feel to hit, you have the power that he has, which is, I think, easily plus. And from the left side, I think Anthony's has the potential to be a really complete and well-rounded baseball player.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like I said, he was the next guy I would have thrown out. Would you agree power over hit with him long term?
Yeah, I would. I do think that the hit is pretty good. Yeah, especially on fastballs. Right now, I think that breaking balls have been a bit of a challenge for him. And, that could be something that ends up kind of lingering still. And if that happens, that's fine. If you pulverize fastballs and pulverize hangers, you'll survive, but you'll definitely be a power over hit guy. But I do think that power is going to end up being clearly plus. And if that's the case, then yeah, it's okay if he's power over hit. It could end up being, a little bit closer to Coby Mayo than maybe, people may think at this stage. But that's not the worst thing in the world, because I think he can do a similar amount of damage. And ironically, they went to the same high school. Yeah.
Interested to see, Anthony, I'm interested to see if he's a guy that ends up getting platoon potentially at the highest level. We'll see. But yeah, I think he's after the slow start, if you're able to kind of buy low after that, I think that'll play out just fine. Let me just throw out the few just honorable mentions here, and then we'll see what your top five is looking like. Just wanted to mention Jet Williams. I know he's on the IL, but I'm not really worried at all about his surface stats before landing on the IL. He was still being very patient. Marcelo Mayer, I think, is worth mentioning here. He's had a nice showing in a repeat trip to Double-A, especially since we've already mentioned Brady House and Colson Montgomery from that same draft. Cole Emerson and Aidan Miller and Matt Shaw from last year's draft, I think, are worth bringing up.
Aidan Miller has been awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I love him. I mean, what do you think about Aidan Miller? Like, where do you sort of see, what do you sort of see as like a peak statistical line for Aidan Miller?
That was one of my favorite threads I put out, and a little bit just because like I was looking at the swing from last year, looking at the swing from this year. I'm like, oh my gosh, this looks a lot better. And he was good, like, good last year. And I think a lot of the reason why people, why he was a first round pick was the bat speed. But if you remember, like there was a lot of moving parts, right? There was a big barrel tip, a late load, but he just relied on freaky hands. And that was, I think, something that got teams really excited. But you're like, okay, well, can you get away with that against better competition? He did all right out of the gate. But then you see him this year, hands are higher. The setup is a little bit different, a little bit narrower, and his load is earlier and smoother. And he's just consistently on time now. And you're also now seeing the result, which is, oh, now my bat speed can really shine through. And as it's doing that, you're seeing power, but you're also seeing he's so quick to the ball that he can get to pitches in all these different zones that I think there's a good feel to hit too. I mean, in terms of like peak, I think the power is more 20 to 25 home run power. And maybe he plays up a little bit more in stretches, and if he's at Citizens Bank or if Dombrowski, sends him out on the next flight for a star to try to win the World Series. But I think with Miller, it's just one of those things where I feel pretty good about the average. I feel pretty good about the power, and it's kind of solid across the board. I could see 280 hitter with 20 to 25 homers, and a guy that can steal some bags too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you talked about the swing changes, and I think that part of what, like, I kind of put pause on him coming into the year just because it did seem, he wasn't pulling the ball with authority after getting drafted, but he is doing that now. And I do, to me, he's helped his stock, I think, as much as any prospect, in terms of climbing from sort of mid top 100 to really into this conversation we're having right now.
Absolutely.
Okay, Aram, why don't you tell me your top 5 hitting prospects who have yet to reach the majors, and then I'll give you mine.
Okay. And this is tough too, because you guys in the fantasy world, I admire what you guys do, because you have to be so malleable too. You have to be able to like reassess so quickly. And otherwise, if you're holding on to like your initial beliefs and things like that, then, you're not doing your listeners or followers justice. But at the same time, it's like, if you believe in someone, you don't want to jump ship too quick. Yeah. I don't envy how frequently you guys have to update things. Cause even as I was putting this together, I'm like, I'm going to change my mind tomorrow. I'm going to want to change it. Like, so, I mean, from a fantasy perspective, it makes it fun and it makes it unique. And I think there's a lot of different guys that you can mix and match within here. But I think number one, you got to go with James Wood right now. And it's funny, I had to add another spot because of me just thinking of guys that just debuted this year. Of course, I had Junior Caminero right in there. But James Wood, Walker Jenkins at 2. I had Coby Mayo at 3 because of all the things that we talked about. And then getting a little bit, riskier, I had Roman Anthony at 4 and Colson Montgomery at 5 there. But it was also tough. Like other names that I considered, Samuel Basayo. I mean, I know he's not swinging it great this year, but he's also so young. Healthy Chase DeLauder is easily in this conversation, but I'm starting to get worried about that foot now a second time. Fortunately, he gets to avoid surgery. But
isn't it a third time, isn't it?
Third time that he's had that foot. I think at least second time for sure. Fracture, or is it 3 fractures?
Oh God, I looked it up the other day.
I don't even.
He had one with James Madison, and then he had one afterwards, and then he had the latest one.
Yeah.
And like, I don't even know if it's a good thing that they're not operating on it, because it almost makes me wonder if they're just like not sure what to do with it, because he keeps,
it just keeps going. It's scary.
It's very concerning.
That's exactly. Sorry to cut you off. I was gonna say that's a guy that I would have had in here. I don't know where you're at on that, but if he was doing similar things out of the gate this year, like, would you have had him in the top 5?
Right there. Yeah. I mean, I had him. If I just kept my rankings the way they were coming into the season, he might have been top 5 here. But I hate to I hate to downgrade a guy. Like, he's going to have the double down arrows next to his name on the next update. And I know people are going to be like, oh, is it just because he was off to a slow start at AA? It's like, really has nothing to do with the slow start. It's just, I'm worried about this guy's ability to make it through a season when he's playing the outfield at 240 pounds.
Especially with how I think how much pressure there are on his feet and his swing too. I mean, there's not very many hitters that are more, I think, more driven in the ground, like the way that, people talk about the way that he slides forward and things. He gets away with it because he's a freak and in the best way possible. But there's a lot of pressure on his feet and things when he's hitting too. And they can't help when it's not feeling good. So yeah, James Wood at 1, Walker Jenkins at 2, Coby Mayo at 3, Roman Anthony at 4, because I think he's about to go nuclear, and Colson Montgomery at 5, just because I like the hit and power combination that you can get there.
I love it. So I'm going James Wood at 1, Coby Mayo at 2, Walker Jenkins at 3. And to me, that was a clear top 3. Mm-hmm. And I could go either way on Mayo versus Jenkins. I think Wood's done enough this year that he is the top guy. Mayo versus Jenkins, it's kind of like, do you want to wait, maybe a year and a half on Jenkins, 2 years on Jenkins, or do you want Coby Mayo, who Aram thinks might even beat James Wood up in the coming weeks here? So I gave Mayo the nod just for proximity, but Wood, Mayo, Jenkins, and then I'm going Xavier Isaac at 4, and I'm going Brady House at 5. Just really, I'm kind of falling for the Brady House, just bat speed, freak, young for the level, great future home park. Just kind of like the trajectory there with House, but yeah, that was fun, man.
That was you're making me already think like, man, could I put a 6th and put Xavier Isaac in there? But no, that's a great list. I love that you're on that train too, because he's a fun player, and I love it when it's a guy that's drafted that you're like, who, and then they end up being something like this. So that was all. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and thanks for having me on and doing this, and I'm excited to see where you'll be at with some of these guys when several of these guys are going to debut soon, and now it becomes a wide open list. Oh, so it'll be a fun conversation in a few weeks even too.
Yeah, once Wood and Mayo are gone, it's just completely wide open, like in terms of where you want to see the hierarchy, because a lot of the best guys are then over a year away. So yeah, fun stuff, Aram. Why don't you let the listeners know where they can keep up with your work?
Yeah, so justbaseball.com. We're continuing to put out our prospect rankings there, continuing to fly through the team top prospect rankings and of course the top 100. But we also are putting out editorial every single day. Really awesome staff of writers that are crushing it. The Just Baseball show, as well as our main flagship podcast, and then the Call Up, which is our prospect podcast. We just had Mayo on last week. We're going to have Jackson Jobe on Monday, who's going to give us a little bit of an update of, what's going on in his recovery. Sounds like all good so far, and he's already, working out and getting ready to go. But looking forward to having Jobe on as well, because I think he's as talented as they come, and he's a really fun interview as well. So you can find that on the Call Up podcast also.
Yeah, if we didn't run as long as we did on hitters, we're going to talk pitchers, but to me it was going to be kind of boring. It's like Jackson Jobe and then
and then
Painter, Horton, whatever. It's kind of
yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think we were going to say anything incredibly unique on that front.
No. Great stuff, Aram. Really appreciate you joining me. The podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use promo code ROTOPOD for a 100% deposit match.